Standing outside my former high school, St.Andrew's Cathedral School here in Sydney. And can you believe our playground was right on the roof up there? And this is of course bang smack in the middle of the city of Sydney. So there's not a lot of room for playgrounds if you're going to have a school in the middle of the city. It's more like going to an office block than going to school. But there were really good kids at that school. And in fact, it was a cathedral school, a chorister's school. And that's St Andrew's Cathedral right there. Now, my whole involvement in investigating Australia's deadliest medical scandal, contaminated blood, started even before I received contaminated blood, was started by a kid that I went to school with. He acquired HIV and developed AIDS as a result of receiving a contaminated blood treatment for a bleeding disorder that he had called haemophilia. Now, this bleeding disorder that he had, it was not going to kill him. It was not like he'd lost a leg in an accident or anything. It was purely a treatment, okay? And in his case, it might have avoided some unsightly bruising, or, he needed blood so that he didn't bleed into his joints, okay? And one day he had some bruising and he went to hospital in 1983 or 82, my memory serves me correctly, somewhere around then, and he received a contaminated treatment called Factor VIII. And the blood was collected from these guys right here, the Australian Red Cross lifeblood. They weren't here back then. They were based on Clarence Street in the city. But how's that for essential irony? That basically the whole link to the scandal for me started at St Andrew's Cathedral here where I went to school because of a kid I knew who was a haemophiliac who got HIV/AIDS. And these guys, the Australian Red Cross lifeblood, did nothing to help him or his family. His parents actually sued, because they needed, in the 1980s, AIDS was a really scary diagnosis. Very few people knew what to do, and he was in major trouble. He was only a kid. He was 11 at the time of his infection. And the Australian Red Cross, the humanitarians, refused him help. And so his parents went to court, and can you believe it? They lost that court case. But the problem is, their little boy died before the conclusion of the case, okay? And in the days before he passed away, reprehensible staff at his hospital denied him pain relief, thinking that he was making a mountain out of a molehill. And so his parents took him home, and he died at home 4 days later. Now, the Australian Red Cross gave no help because they basically said it wasn't their fault. It was an unavoidable tragedy. The blood had been collected, best science advice had been used, best health advice. Well, I knew that any organisation or any government like the Australian government or any humanitarian organisation like this one that doesn't help a kid with AIDS is up to something. They're hiding something. And so guess what? A little while after I knew about this guy, in 1988, my bone marrow failed and I required blood. And well, I knew about how badly the kid who went to my school had been treated. And so I knew that I'd end up with contaminated blood. And that's why I knew, even when doctors told me I was crazy, I knew to get tested, because I didn't believe them. And so my interest really sparked up then. And, here we have this Australian Red Cross lifeblood, these humanitarians who pay their executives hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, okay? And they have got no answers other than it was a tragedy. So I went looking, and this is the sort of publication that the Australian Red Cross lifeblood advertised in for blood donors in the 1980s. It's a sexually explicit gay publication. And this is where the boy I went to school with, this is where his blood would have come from high-risk donors that the Australian Red Cross lifeblood never told us about. They never told us that they sent mobile blood collection vans to prostitution areas during the HIV crisis. They never told us that they advertised in sexually explicit publications during the HIV crisis. All they told us was exactly nothing. To the one or two people that know about this scandal in Australia, the Red Cross will say it's an unavoidable tragedy. And these bastards 20 years ago tried to jail me when I started to reveal that actually in the 1990s, they used to find if you were tested positive to the deadly virus hepatitis C, the Australian Red Cross would encourage you to keep on donating blood. Incredible. And they gave that blood to a company called CSL, who then infected 100% of the users of their product with hepatitis C. This is their now infamous Factor VIII product that wiped out haemophiliacs in Australia, killed 1,400 people like the kid I went to school with at St Andrews. And they also exported it around the world, and they infected people in Southeast Asia. Children and adults were infected with HIV and hepatitis C from exported blood, exported Australian blood that the Australian Lifeblood collected, and companies like CSL distributed, causing absolute chaos around the world and a lot of tears. And here we are decades later, and I'm still campaigning. I'll never stop campaigning over this. I went to a good school. St. Andrew's was a good school, and it had good pupils. We had a great ethos, and I'm not going to give up. And I know I've got other former pupils from my school who are also committed, like I am, to getting to the bottom of this outrage. A young kid was killed through criminal negligence, and these bastards over here collect nothing but our money and our goodwill, but they won't give us answers as to what the bloody hell they're up to. Well, we're going to get those answers. I'm not taking no for an answer. Okay, we need the facts. That little boy was killed by a blood collection like this. Okay, and if you feel as I do that we need a Royal Commission, please click on the link in our bio and register your support if you're watching this on Instagram, or click on the link in the description of the video if you're watching on another platform. But we've got to get to the bottom of what happened to kids like that kid who went to St. Andrews, and why the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood were collecting blood from high-risk donors, and why decades later they still won't tell us the truth. I don't trust them as managers of our blood supply, I've got to say. I really don't. I think they need to be removed from the management of Australia's blood supply, and certainly they need to give us answers straight away. Thank you.